So since July 2024, when I started to be in touch with Ecomma, and I looked at several businesses, they all sounded very good, but I guess I couldn't make the final step to invest, even though the offering from Ecomma was, exactly what I was looking for, because they were the first one that provided basically a team that comes with the business, which is what I was looking for. I guess I was just not believing that this could be true. Finally, I gave myself a push, and in September 2025, finally, so after more than 1 year, I decided to invest in a business, and we were almost about to close. And then Ecomma called me and said, don't invest in the business, the latest figures are not so good, and we are looking for another business. This was another thing where I found that Ecomma is the right partner, because they warned me about this business, and they could have just proceeded and closed the business in their own interest, which they didn't do. So that was another positive sign. And then I think 2 months later, they offered me a business which I also liked very much. And ultimately we closed. And Ecomma even flew in. I live in Bangkok. And they flew into Bangkok for a closing session where we did the handover. And I found that also, very, very committed, and gave me another comfort sign that Ecomma is the right partner. So from my experience of having my own business, I knew that it requires a lot of time commitment and also a lot of know-how to run the business and make it successful. And I knew I don't have this know-how. So that's why Ecomma was the right partner. They promised, and ultimately they also delivered in supporting me in the marketing side, the logistics side, and all other aspects to run the business, which gives me free time for my main activities, and which allows me to build a passive investment, which is what I'm looking for. Ultimately, I'm looking for a passive portfolio, and I need a trusted partner that I can rely on the day-to-day business, and where I get the necessary information to make decisions more on a mid and long term on the strategy. But the day-to-day business, I don't need to be involved. That's why I went with Ecomma, and I didn't find anyone else on the market, interestingly, who could provide that kind of offering to me. When I decided for the ultimate business, I looked at many offerings from Ecomma, and ultimately I decided to invest in the business that I now invested in, is basically the product, the market. So I wanted something that it's not only about the money and invest and make some returns, it's also about passion. At least for me, it's about passion. I need to like the product. I need to identify myself with the product, because the headline is passive investment, but actually it's also about wanting to be an entrepreneur and identifying myself with the product, and not only be a financial investor. And this is what Ecomma provided me with. They looked at businesses. I gave them basically my profile, what I'm looking for, the market, and the business that I invested in is exactly what I wanted. So one step was to close the transaction with Ecomma, basically to acquire the business. But the more important step, and this is what I was curious and also a bit afraid of, is then the execution, right? Closing is easy, but then the practical thing, which I was always concerned about, how to run the business without being involved on a day-to-day business. The setup was quite convincing of Ecommerce. First, the handover they had prepared and shared, via Google Drive, Google Docs, all the necessary documents that I need, first of all, to basically prove that I own the business, with all the logins that are required, the documents, the history, and historical reports that could enable me. First of all, there was also an important part of the due diligence, of looking at the business. I did a very detailed due diligence to first understand the business, and also understand, because not everything is perfect, I know that, I tried to find out the weak points, right? And I could find those with the help of Ecomma, the information that was provided. Then the handover, I had everything in one pack, so we could start. And this was a good starting point. And then onwards, there were regular, or since then we have weekly calls at least, but also the Ecommerce team is not only available on these weekly calls where I get updates on the marketing activities, on the sales activities of the week, but they're also available, I mean, I would almost say day and night. It's not even what I expect, so beyond my expectations. On WhatsApp, if there's an issue, there's always things coming up on the day-to-day business where they need my advice, and that's working very well.